Here's a stat that I thought was going to favor Ohio State in the national title push, and lo and behold, I was wrong. I was not expecting this, but that's how we're going to start the Monday, with trying to learn and then speculate about how Ohio State can correct this trend that's been going on for 10 years. That's Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. This is the Podcast Daily. It's Monday. Bill already knows this because he knows every stat that has ever been written about college football.
I don't know this. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. The last 10 years, CBS Sports wrote this story over the weekend, and it was like, which teams have the critical continuity needed to win a national championship? And I thought, well, that sounds like Ohio State. They have a lot of really good players back. The coaching staff is in a pretty consistent place. Could there be someone that fits the bill better than them? And it turns out Ohio State didn't fit this criteria at all, which is this. Dating back to the start of the college football playoff era, every champion has had at least three of these four things: the same head coach, the same offensive coordinator, the same defensive coordinator, and a returning quarterback who started at least 4 games. And we can argue about if Ohio State is better off with two of those four things being different. But going back to Ohio State and the start of the playoff era, they're the ones that began this trend, and now they would be an outlier. But also, we're not in the 14 playoff era. So with a hat tip to Bo Bishop, is this thing a thing or not a thing, Bill?
It's interesting. I thought you were going to go down the head coach coordinator road there. Throwing in quarterback, I think makes sense. I guess I would say that I don't agree that Ohio State doesn't qualify, because while the qualifier that in there is that it's a returning starting quarterback, like Will Howard has started college games, right? It's not like they're throwing somebody out there, presumably, to start who has not played or not started at least 4 games before. So like it makes sense to me that you would need those things. I'm surprised that every champion has had those 4 things. I don't know that I would have guessed that, but certainly like
they only needed 3 of the 4.
Yeah.
Which
3
is
of the 4. 3 of the 4. Yeah. Right. But
which is what makes it a weird stat, and that's like,
yeah. I would say that Ohio State does have 3 of the 4. I would push back against that.
I would agree. Semantics are a thing, but Will Howard started way more than 4 games, and I know they haven't been at Ohio State, but he started way more than 4 games.
Well, I think, but that's fair to include. If their premise here is continuity, we'd have to say that Will Howard is learning a new system. He's learning new teammates. Mm-hmm. There is no existing continuity and chemistry for him from Kansas State that applies to Ohio State. The experience absolutely does. And maybe they could have, CBS Sports could have said, because this would apply, like any quarterback on your roster who started 4 games, like that helps you out. But that's not what they were saying. And I can get it that maybe like it doesn't mean anything, and it's not been true for every national champion in the history of college football. And if they had just kept Kyle McCord, would that have made them more likely to win the national championship this year than with Will Howard? I think probably not. It would have checked the boxes for this conversation, but it doesn't, I don't think, would have raised the ceiling for Ohio State based on what they're trying to accomplish, which, begs a whole nother conversation about what Ohio State's doing at quarterback. And if they are giving up something maybe in the passing ability, are they regaining that with rushing with both Devin Brown and Will Howard? Probably. And that's what they're hoping to accomplish now, which then ties in directly to the new offensive coordinator that they brought in. All these things, I think, make Ohio State probably more likely to win a national championship than if they had checked 3 of these 4 boxes that might seem pretty arbitrary, but at least had some historical precedent over the last decade.
Yeah. I mean, you can argue Ohio State upgraded at quarterback and at offensive coordinator. And so like, you're not just maybe not returning them, but you got improvements there. And so I think that, obviously you can make an argument about whatever you want, but I do understand the scope that they're looking for here and the 4 things, but you added Chip Kelly as your offensive coordinator, and it's not a knock on Kyle McCord. I think Will Howard and him might be a wash in a lot of ways, but just the upgrade of Chip Kelly as your offensive coordinator, to me, far outweighs the lack of continuity when it comes to Will Howard inside of the program.
Yeah, I would take. I mean, I would take continuity, obviously, but I think for Will Howard's sake, like, experience is probably more important. And that, like, he's old too. Like, I just don't. I have a really
How
hard
old is he?
time seeing.
Sorry,
I actually don't know how. I'm assuming
Nah,
he's 22. I actually don't know how old he is. I have a hard time envisioning a scenario where, like, Will Howard struggles to pick things up just because he is such an older college football player and has played. It actually hasn't started as much as you think, but he has played a lot. So I'd rather have that experience than, like, I don't know, a guy. I think I'd rather have Will Howard's experience over a guy who had happened to play 4 games in Ohio State's offense coming into this season. I think I would take that trade off. And then, like, Chip Kelly, while yes, it is a new offensive coordinator, and I agree with Berm that it's. I don't know if upgrade's interesting because, like, an upgrade over Ryan Day, that's a nuanced conversation, I think, but I do think it was a good addition, and I think is going to, like, drastically improve the areas where Ohio State has been deficient. So, like, if it was a coordinator coming in and wholesale changing the offense, I would probably think differently, or at least have more questions about where exactly it's going than I do now. But I do agree with the like, and I know that history bears it out. But, like, if you're going to tell me, like, hey, it's really important to have returning head coach, returning coordinator, returning quarterback to win a national championship, like, duh, I agree. And the fact that Ohio State doesn't have those things is mildly interesting, but I think they are probably an outlier because of the familiarity of scheme between Chip Kelly and Ryan Day, and the fact that Will Howard has so much experience despite being new.
Yeah, and how many of those national champions in that time added the SEC's best offensive and best defensive player? Also, you know what I mean? Like, this year, I mean, it's a perfect time to start a new era of college football, because I think the Ohio State not fitting into this mold perfectly, but rather, like, almost. I mean, we can have the arguments, we can have the conversations, but I think that speaks more to where college football is and is going now, because teams are going to be changing so much year to year now because of the transfer portal and all that stuff, that I just think that type of continuity is going to be very rare.
But I think that's the most interesting part about this set of criteria, is that you're still keeping, even if your roster is in transition, it is, you have a head coach and the coordinators who provide you the stability up top. And I don't think that will change. I don't think there's going to be enough turnover for annual year in, year out contenders that there probably won't be tremendous disruption to this stat outside of Ohio State, which is in a unique situation where, Bill brought this up. It's not necessarily replacing Ryan Day as much as it is swapping out Corey Dennis's spot on the staff for Chip Kelly, in which case I would be stunned if there wasn't unanimous agreement across the country that Ohio State came out with a net positive there and an improvement to the coaching staff. So there are still things that have to be worked out, new wrinkles and new additions, changes across the board. But Ohio State's probably more likely, we're calling them an outlier, and they can buck this trend, but I don't think it will set a new one. I think those 4 things are still going to probably be more often than not found on people who can make it through the 16 to 17 game season and win a trophy.
This is not, I'm assuming, I didn't read the article. I'm assuming this was not mentioned in the CBS article, and I also might be wrong, so you guys can check me on that too.
Ooh.
But Joe Burrow's the only transfer quarterback that's won a national championship. Is that right? In the playoff era? Ohio State didn't have a transfer. Oh, was Jake Coker a transfer in 2015? He might have been. But, like, Clemson didn't have a transfer. Alabama's second title was Hurts and Tua. Alabama's third title was Mac Jones. And then Stetson Bennett, I guess, technically transferred away from Georgia and then transferred back, but I wouldn't count that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, assuming I am correct and not wrong there, does the fact that a team, I don't think a team has done what Ohio State's trying to do, which is win a national title with a 1-year rental starting quarterback. Does that concern you at all?
That concerns me more than anything. I mean, we could talk about the experience of Will Howard and how that's valuable, but there is a major step from taking Kansas State's roster to the Big 12 championship game and Ohio State's roster to the national title. So I think that's a real concern. Obviously, it's not done for a reason, because this isn't the ideal way to build a roster. With the teams that are traditionally counting on one-year transfers, or they're using them as stopgaps or using them as program builders, this is not the case. I mean, this is we have everything else, you just need to come in and not screw it up kind of deal, like, which is uncomfortable, I think. But yeah, I mean, that's a much bigger concern to me than not hitting the 3 of the 4 in those other parameters.
Yeah, Jay Coker was a transfer, but he was in his second year at Alabama when they won the title.
Yeah, so he fits that mold that they described here as well. If you're keeping score at home, the lead to the story did make reference to, and I quote, the Buckeyes loaded up on transfer talent. So I won't make any other comment about that.
No all-star team?
No, they loaded up. They loaded up. Okay. Don't ask how many they loaded up on, because that might undermine this comment here. But, I'm not going to get upset about it or make a big deal. I'm just letting everyone else know that I'm reading the coverage about Ohio State, and I'm keeping tabs on everyone who is referencing the offseason that way. I like the rest of the story.
Who's the author of this piece?
I'm not going to say.
Is there a generally agreed upon numerical definition of what constitutes a load? And is it 6?
I suspect if you pointed out to someone that 6 doesn't sound like loading up in the transfer portal, they'd say, you know what? You're absolutely right. I should listen to the podcast daily more often. They loaded up an all-star team in the transfer portal is what they did.
A buttload is 126 gallons of wine, if you're interested. That's a buttload.
Thank you.
I didn't know that was an official unit of measurement.
It's an official unit of measurement for wine. 126 gallons of wine is a buttload of wine. Ohio State did not have a buttload of transfers, nor did they have a load of transfers. They had a 6-pack.
Which we all know is not enough to get loaded. Yeah.
You really tied that nicely together with the alcohol there, Berm. The Buckeyes were also attacking and loading up on the recruiting trail over the weekend. What'd they do, Berm?
2 commitments. Quincy Porter, 4-star wide receiver from New Jersey, on Friday picked Ohio State over Michigan and Oklahoma and Penn State, Alabama, among others. Was supposed to go to Michigan on Friday. Instead, he stayed home and announced his commitment to Ohio State. Sunday was Isaiah West, 3-star running back on Rivals.com, 4-star, a couple other spots from Philadelphia St. Joe's Prep. He is a player the Buckeyes really, really like. Not as highly rated as Jordan Davison, who will visit this coming weekend from California, but a player that Carlos Loughlin zeroed in on the moment that he took the job at Ohio State. Ironically, or not ironically, but funny enough, I had an interview with Isaiah on Bermanology on Sunday, and he mentioned that Carlos Loughlin had told him that he wasn't going to offer him when he was at Oregon because it was too far away from Philadelphia. Like, you're not going to come out here, essentially. So as soon as he got to Ohio State, he's like, oh, now I'm going to offer this kid. So I think that's funny to me. But big additions, up to 16 commitments. Ohio State's now the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the country across the board, with maybe the biggest weekend of the summer coming up with 5-star David Sanders, Jordan Davison, Dorian Brew, Devin Sanchez, Naeem Offord, Tavian St. Clair, all making their official visits coming up. So they're heating up. Some changes happening around the country. Players that the Buckeyes have hosted, like Jackson Lloyd, the offensive tackle from California, who looks like he's going to end up at Alabama. So it was an eventful weekend for Ohio State. 11 official visitors. Still trying to parse through really what else to make of the weekend. Because Sunday is Father's Day, try not to bother people who are normally sources, because I think it's rude to ask them about stuff when they get 6 hours off for the entire week, and it happens to be Father's Day. And I figure that I hope that fans understand that in the month of June, these dudes get 6 hours off a week, and it happens to be Sunday afternoon. So there's obviously good news coming for Ohio State. I think that this class might end up getting to be like 26, 27 dudes, which is going to be very interesting because Ryan Day, since he took over in 2019, has generally chosen to go for smaller classes, but you almost have to go big in this cycle because of all the expected attrition to the NFL. And, with the number of guys that came back, like this class was going to be big. And I was doing some research on Sunday, and there has not been, again, it was rivals.com, and I think it's the same with 247. There's never been a Big Ten team to win the national recruiting title since the internet era began. Ohio State has finished second a number of times, but they've never won. No one in the Big Ten has won that recruiting title. And the Buckeyes are actually in a pretty solid position. And I think it could come down to the offensive line to see if they win it or not.
Bill, what did you?
They have one if you go by the. I'm sorry, go ahead, Austin.
No, you can go ahead. That seems like a more relevant thought than talking
I was going to
about
ask.
St. Joe's.
We can talk about St. Joe's. Ohio State has one like the 24/7 composite, like average player rating crown a couple of times, right? But not the cumulative. We signed 35 players, so we're in the number one class crown.
Yeah, because if you look at even 2021, Ohio State finished second in the nation. 2018, they finished second in the nation. 2017 finished second in the nation. 2013 finished second in the nation. So 2008, I think we're second. Like they've been right there a lot, and they're always in the top five. And I don't know that it ultimately matters if you are 1 or 2 or 3, but this is a cycle where you see Ohio State really being aggressive. And I think the nice thing is that there's actually a good mix right now of the depth pieces that you need to really fill out a class, because you can't sign 28 4-stars or 5-stars. Like that's just not the way it's going to be. So if you can find guys like Isaiah West, who the coaching staff at Ohio State loves, and maybe he's a 3-star because he doesn't run the ball a crap ton at St. Joe's Prep, or because he doesn't go out and do the recruiting camps that everyone demands you do in order to, buoy their brands and not actually help the players. But if you're out there putting your name out there, you get a little bit more of the accolades. But what the Buckeyes are doing right now, I talked a lot about Bodepin Miller, the wide receiver from Ontario, Ohio, on Thursday's episode of Talking Stuff. Like, I think Ohio State's going to offer this kid on Tuesday as a wide receiver at 6'4", 180 pounds, and he ran like 22.6 miles an hour or something last week at camp. So, like, there's freaks out there that they're just like, in past years, I don't think they would have even thought about it, but now you're starting to see them change the recruiting tactic a little bit to be a bit more balanced, because NIL, transfer portal, all this other stuff, like, you can't sign 28 all-stars.
What's the difference between a crap ton and a buttload?
I don't know if a crap ton is an actual measurement. A buttload is 126 gallons of wine.
Okay.
Fine American wine or great French wine. It just depends. Either way, although I think 126 gallons of French wine is le buttload. And in America, it's just a buttload.
Got it. Bill, there's another Philadelphia proud son of the Catholic League on the way.
I need to do some more research to know if he's actually from Philadelphia, because kind of accord with the St. Joe's Prep, but he's famously from New Jersey. But either way, no, it's cool. It's interesting because Philadelphia is much better like at producing high school talent than it was like when I was in high school 15 years ago, because I'm old. No, more than that. And a lot of those kids go south. Like, the two biggest talent producing programs are St. Joe's Prep and Imhotep Charter. I went to Imhotep. I've been to both. I went to Imhotep like 3 years ago, and I talked with their coach, and he said, like, a lot of kids want to get out of Philly. They want to go down south. A lot of them end up at like Texas A&M or Georgia, or at least had. I think part of that was like Elijah Robinson, who was down at A&M, and Fran Brown, who was at Georgia, who are now both at Syracuse. So maybe you'll see kids from Philly go to Syracuse. But either way, like, Ohio State has done really good work, I think, making inroads in that city. I know that they have a kid from Imhotep too, committed in 2025. So it's kind of a tough nut to crack, I think, like, to get in there and like get kids to want to go to Ohio from Philadelphia. Like, I don't mean that to come off in the wrong way. I just don't think that a lot of kids in the city of Philadelphia like view Ohio as a place that they can go, even if it is a program like Ohio State. So the fact that Ohio State has had a foothold at St. Joe's Prep for a couple of years now, but also has it at Imhotep too, like, and I think maybe those two programs will send fewer kids to the SEC now that like the area recruiters from the Philadelphia area aren't really down there anymore. Could be a real opportunity for Ohio State to clean up in Philadelphia, because like Penn State doesn't. Rutgers and Syracuse, I'm sure will try to, but Ohio State will win that. So it's not like, it's not going down the recruit in South Florida, but there's probably 4 or 5 kids in Philly every year worth taking a look at now, and Ohio State's doing a good job there.
One more thing about recruiting. I just maybe you saw it earlier, maybe you didn't, but Austin, Bill, this is a test for you guys. Ohio State is the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the country. They have 16 commitments. Notre Dame has 21 in the Big Ten. So not counting USC, because I don't want to count USC as a Big Ten school yet. Who is the second?
You have to, bud.
Okay, fine. Who's the 3rd ranked recruiting class in the Big Ten right now?
I know the answer. What else, I guess?
Iowa.
No.
Rutgers
with 26 commitments.
What?
Didn't they add like 19 off their first official visit weekend?
26 commitments. 21 of them are 3-stars, which is, whatever. 8 of them are from New Jersey, 5 from Florida, 3 from Georgia. They're out there rocking and rolling.
So what is that good for them? Like 14th in the country?
Right now, I think they are on the 247 composite. They are number 9 in the country.
Oh, wow.
But again, they have 26 commitments, where if you look at Ohio State with 16, Alabama 15, Georgia 13, Clemson 13, they're doubling up. But hey, that's what you got to do. Get out of Greg Schiano's way is ultimately the lesson here.
If Greg Schiano starts pressing if he starts pressing the gas pedal, you are in trouble. Wherever you are, he will find you. 3 straight attempts at jokes at Greg Schiano's expense to wrap up a Monday edition of the Podcast Daily. I did not have that on my bingo card, but we've got an opportunity to fill it out with a lot of weird stuff in the week ahead, as we're at the midway point of June. A camp coming later on Monday at the Woody, which I believe, Berm, that's the last individual skills camp for the Buckeyes this month. There's another 7-on-7 on Tuesday, and then some official visit opportunities. So, of course, Berm will have all of that covered. We'll be at Roosters. We've got some more content coming in the works as well down the stretch here at this big month, critical month for the Buckeyes. Stay tuned with us for all of it. For Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham, I am Austin Ward. We'll talk to you later.